Hey everyone, welcome back. Ready for another deep dive? Today we're going to be looking at something kind of different, but super interesting.
Yeah, like how do you even define?
Uh-huh, exactly.
Yeah.
We've got some excerpts from this text about definitions and self-referencing. It gets,
Yeah, it gets pretty deep.
yeah, it really does. Like seriously mind-bending stuff.
Yeah, the source even asks, like, how can you define nothing? Like, before you even have any words or symbols to...
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah.
Like, how do you even begin to...
Oh, yeah, right?
So how do we even start with this whole definition thing? Like, where do we even begin?
Well, the text talks about this idea of distinguishing. It's like the very first step.
Distinguishing.
Yeah, like separating this from that.
Yeah.
You know, recognizing that things are different. It's like the most basic way we make sense of the world.
Okay, I think I see what you mean. So before we can even label something, we have...
You got to see how it's different from everything else. It's like, think about how babies learn. They're figuring out what's their hand and what's not their hand, what's mom and what's...
Right. It's all about figuring out the boundaries between things.
Exactly. And that idea, that distinguishing, it's like the foundation of everything, even in math and physics. Like the difference between 0 and 1.
Oh, yeah. 0 and 1. That's like the basis of binary code and computers and...
And everything digital. It all comes back to that simple distinction. Pretty wild when you think about it.
It really is.
Yeah.
But, okay, so we start by noticing differences.
Yeah.
How do we go from there to actually making, definitions?
Well, the text says that definitions are basically agreements.
Agreements. Wait, so you're saying
Like they're not some universal truth. They're tools that we create to help us communicate.
Hold on. So if I just decide that, like chair now means elephant.
Uh-huh. Well, you could.
Is that a valid definition then?
You could try, but you probably wouldn't get very far.
Right. People would be pretty confused.
The point is, definitions work because we agree on what they mean. It's like a social contract,
Okay, that makes sense. But doesn't that mean that, like, anything goes?
Yeah.
Are all definitions equally valid?
That's a good question. But even though they're agreements, most of our definitions are based on, reality. Like we look at a tree and we all agree to call it a tree because it's got a trunk and leaves and...
Right, there's something real that we're pointing to.
Exactly. It's not just random. There's a connection between the word and the actual thing.
But then we use those words to create even more complex definitions, right? Like we take the word tree and make family tree, which is totally different.
Totally. It's like a loop. Symbols defining symbols.
Yeah, the text talks about that. It's like we build these layers of meaning, and it all goes back to those basic distinctions we were talking about.
Yeah. It's pretty amazing, huh? From just noticing differences to this whole complex system of language.
Seriously, it's mind-blowing. So, to recap, we start by distinguishing, then we agree on what those distinctions mean, and then we use those agreed-upon meanings, which are basically symbols, to define even more symbols.
You got it. And that brings us to a pretty big question for you, the listener.
Uh-oh, here it comes.
If all definitions are agreements, does that mean there's no such thing as objective truth? Like, is everything just... And if words can change their meaning, how do we ever really know if we're understanding each other?
That's a lot to think about.
It is. And it shows you just how powerful language is. So the next time you hear a definition, think about the agreements behind it and how those agreements shape the way you see the world. It's a deep dive all on its own.
Well said. Thanks for taking us on that deep dive today. It was
It was my pleasure. Anytime. Always happy to talk about this stuff.
Until next time.
See ya.